If I told you that a 68-year-old man brought an entire neighborhood to their knees, you probably wouldn't believe me. But when you hear Robert Henderson's story, you'll understand that age is just a number, and respect is something you earn through a lifetime of service. What you're about to hear will leave you speechless. This is the kind of story that makes you question everything you think you know about quiet strength and hidden power. Robert had taught at Jefferson Elementary for 45 years. He'd taught thousands of children how to read and write. Math, science, history. In every class he approached his students with patience and love. When he retired, even the principal cried, "You're the heart of this school, Robert," she'd said. "It won't be the same without you." The first years of retirement were beautiful. He and his wife Martha would tend to their garden together, visit their grandchildren. But in the third year, everything changed. Martha's heart stopped. One morning at breakfast she'd said, "I feel a little dizzy." That evening she took her last breath in the hospital. Robert's world collapsed. After 42 years of marriage being alone, the house was so quiet that sometimes he'd talk out loud just to hear his own voice. The neighbors were understanding at first. They'd bring food, check on him. But as months passed, Robert just became that old man. His house on Maple Street had been purchased with Martha. Small but well-maintained. White picket fence, rose garden in front. Martha's flowers were still recognized throughout the neighborhood. But now Robert couldn't manage the garden anymore. He forgot to prune the roses, mow the lawn. His grief was so overwhelming that he couldn't find the strength for daily tasks. This is exactly when the neighbors' attitudes began to change. "His front yard looks terrible," they started muttering. "The old man can't take care of his house anymore." Nobody thought about how difficult things were for a man in mourning. Worst of all were the children. They used to respect Robert. When they saw him on the street, they'd say, "Hello, Mr. Henderson." But now there were different children in the neighborhood. Newly moved families. These kids didn't know who Robert was. Everything started that Saturday morning. Robert was watering Martha's roses in his garden. His eyes were teary because every rose reminded him of his wife. Just then, 3 children around 12 years old were passing by on the street. Tommy, Jake, and Madison, the children of the newly moved Brennan family. "Look at that old man," Tommy said with a grin. "Think he's a rotten grandpa?" Jake burst out laughing. "Yeah, rotten grandpa. Stinky grandpa." Madison hesitated a bit. But when her friends laughed, she joined in. "Rotten grandpa." Robert looked up. He saw the children yelling at him, but couldn't quite understand what they were saying. Due to his age, he had hearing problems. He put his hand to his ear and asked, "What did you say, children?" This gesture encouraged the children even more. Tommy picked up a small stone and threw it into Robert's garden. The stone hit one of the rose branches. "Rotten grandpa," he shouted even louder. Robert understood then. The children were making fun of him. As a man who had approached children with love for 45 years, he was confused about what to do in this situation. "Children, please," he tried to say, but his voice was so broken that even he couldn't hear it. The children ran away. Tommy turned back and shouted, "We'll come back tomorrow, rotten grandpa." That evening, Robert cried while looking at his wife's photograph. "Martha, I don't know what to do," he whispered. "These children, it wasn't like this before." The next day, the children really came back. This time they didn't just shout. They threw small stones into the garden. They stuck gum on Robert's mailbox. "Rotten grandpa's house," they shouted while laughing hysterically. Robert went inside and thought about calling the police. But what would he say? Children are calling me rotten grandpa. Who would take this seriously? But then things got worse. The children started coming every day after school. They'd throw things at his house, trample his flower beds, and always with that cruel chant, "Rotten grandpa. Rotten grandpa." Robert's health began to deteriorate. He wasn't eating properly, wasn't sleeping. The stress was killing him slowly. Real quick, if you want more jaw-dropping stories like this, subscribe now, and let's get back to what happened next. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon. Robert was sitting on his porch, trying to enjoy what little sunshine he could get. His arthritis was acting up, and moving around was becoming more difficult. That's when he saw the children approaching again. But this time there were more of them. 5 kids, led by Tommy. "Hey, rotten grandpa," Tommy called out. "Why don't you just die already? Nobody wants you here." The other children laughed. Madison, who had seemed uncertain before, was now fully participating. "Yeah, you smell like death anyway." Jake picked up a larger rock this time. "Let's see if the old man can dodge this." He hurled it toward Robert's front window. The stone crashed through the glass, sending shards everywhere. Robert instinctively ducked, feeling a piece of glass nick his cheek. "Stop." Robert tried to shout, but his voice came out as a weak croak. The children just laughed harder. "What are you gonna do? Call the cops?" Tommy taunted. "Tell them some kids broke your precious window. They'll probably thank us for trying to get rid of you." The children scattered, high-fiving each other as they ran down the street. Robert sat there, blood trickling down his cheek, surrounded by broken glass. For the first time in his life, he felt completely powerless. This wasn't like dealing with difficult students in a classroom where he had authority and respect. This was different. Cruel. Personal. That night, Robert called his son Michael in California. "Dad, you sound terrible," Michael said immediately. "What's wrong?" Robert tried to explain about the children, about feeling unsafe in his own home. But as he spoke, he realized how pathetic it sounded. A grown man being terrorized by children. "Dad, maybe it's time to consider that assisted living facility we talked about," Michael said gently. "You shouldn't be dealing with this alone." After hanging up, Robert sat in his living room, staring at the boarded-up window. Was this how it ended? 45 years of dedicated service to children, and now children were driving him from his home. He looked at Martha's photo on the mantel. "I failed you," he whispered. "I couldn't even protect our home." But then something unexpected happened. As Robert was cleaning up the glass the next morning, his neighbor Mrs. Patterson came over. She was in her 50s, lived 2 houses down with her husband. "Mr. Henderson, I saw what those kids did yesterday," she said, her voice full of concern. "This has gone too far. Have you called their parents?" Robert shook his head. "I don't even know which house they live in. And honestly, Mrs. Patterson, what's the point? Who's going to discipline their children because an old man complained?" Mrs. Patterson's expression hardened. Those children need to learn respect, and their parents need to know what they're raising. She paused, studying Robert's defeated posture. "Mr. Henderson, didn't you teach at Jefferson Elementary? My sister's kids went there years ago. They used to talk about their favorite teacher all the time. Mr. Henderson, who made learning fun, who never gave up on anyone." For the first time in weeks, Robert straightened his shoulders slightly. That was a long time ago. Not that long, Mrs. Patterson said firmly. And I bet you still have connections there. People who remember what you did for this community. That afternoon, Robert did something he hadn't done since Martha's funeral. He put on his best shirt, combed his gray hair, and walked the 6 blocks to Jefferson Elementary. His legs ached with every step, but something Mrs. Patterson had said resonated with him. He wasn't just some old man. He was Robert Henderson. He had meant something to this community once. The school looked different after his years away. New paint, new playground equipment. But the building itself was the same one where he'd spent half his life. He walked through the main entrance, his steps echoing in the familiar hallways. "Mr. Henderson." The voice came from behind him. He turned to see Principal Martinez approaching with a huge smile. She'd been a young teacher when Robert retired. "What brings you here? Please tell me you're thinking about substitute teaching again." Robert felt a warmth he hadn't experienced in months. Someone was genuinely happy to see him. "Actually, I was hoping to speak with you about something. It's personal." They sat in her office, and Robert told her everything. The harassment, the broken window, the feeling of being helpless in his own neighborhood. Principal Martinez listened without interrupting, her expression growing more serious with each detail. "Mr. Henderson," she said when he finished, "first of all, I'm so sorry this is happening to you. Second, you should know that you taught at least a dozen police officers, 3 judges, the mayor's chief of staff, and more teachers than I can count. You're not powerless. You just forgot who you are." "I'm not sure any of them would remember me," Robert said quietly. Principal Martinez picked up her phone. "Let me call someone. Officer Sarah Chen. She graduated from here in 1998. You taught her 4th grade. She always said you changed her life by believing in her when nobody else would." As the principal made the call, Robert felt something stirring inside him that had been dormant for months. It wasn't anger exactly. It was something more powerful. It was the quiet determination that had carried him through 45 years of challenging students, difficult parents, and budget cuts. The same strength that had helped him reach kids everyone else had given up on. 20 minutes later, Officer Chen walked into the principal's office. She was in her 30s now, confident and professional in her uniform. But when she saw Robert, her face lit up like she was 9 years old again. "Mr. Henderson," she exclaimed, crossing the room to shake his hand. "You probably don't remember me, but—" "Sarah Chen," Robert interrupted, a small smile crossing his face for the first time in weeks. "You had trouble with fractions until we figured out you learned better with visual aids. You wrote a story about your grandmother that made the whole class cry. Of course I remember you." Sarah's eyes misted over. "You saved my academic career. I was ready to give up on school until you showed me I could learn differently." She sat down across from him. "Principal Martinez said you need help with something." Robert told his story again, but this time it felt different. He wasn't a helpless old man complaining about neighborhood kids. He was a respected teacher, asking for assistance from a former student who had become a police officer. The dynamic had shifted completely. "Mr. Henderson," Sarah said when he finished, "what these kids are doing isn't just disrespectful. Throwing rocks through windows is vandalism. Destroying property is a crime. And harassment of an elderly person can be charged as a hate crime in some circumstances." Her voice had taken on a professional edge. "But more than that, these children clearly don't understand who they're messing with." "What do you mean?" Robert asked. Sarah smiled. "I mean, you taught half the people who run this town. Let me make some phone calls. Over the next hour, something remarkable happened. Sarah reached out to other former students of Robert's, who now held positions of influence in the community. The domino effect was immediate and powerful. Judge Patricia Walsh, who Robert had taught in 1987, agreed to speak to the children about respect and consequences. Detective Mike Rodriguez, class of 1995, offered to visit the families in an official capacity. Even Mayor Thompson's office called back within 30 minutes. The mayor himself wanted to meet with Robert and discuss community service programs. But the most surprising call came from Special Agent Jennifer Morrison of the FBI. She had been one of Robert's most challenging students in 1993, an angry girl whose father had abandoned the family. Robert had spent countless hours after school helping her with homework, and more importantly, listening to her fears and frustrations. "Mr. Henderson," Agent Morrison said over speakerphone, "Sarah told me what's been happening. I'm actually in town this week visiting my mother. Would you mind if I stopped by your house tomorrow? I think it's time these kids learned about respect." That evening, Robert sat in his living room feeling something he hadn't felt since Martha died. Hope. Not just hope that his situation would improve, but pride in the legacy he'd built. These successful adults, police officers, judges, FBI agents, they weren't just former students. They were people whose lives he had genuinely impacted. People who remembered his kindness, his patience, his refusal to give up on anyone. He looked at Martha's photo. "Maybe I haven't failed after all," he whispered. The next morning, Robert was in his garden attempting to tend to Martha's roses when he heard familiar voices approaching. Tommy, Jake, Madison, and two other kids were walking down the street, probably planning their daily harassment session. "Look, there's the rotten grandpa," Tommy called out. "Let's see if we can make him cry today." But as the children approached Robert's house, something unprecedented happened. A black sedan with government plates pulled up to the curb. Out stepped Agent Morrison, tall, confident, wearing a crisp business suit, and the kind of presence that commanded immediate attention. The children stopped dead in their tracks. Agent Morrison walked directly to Robert, ignoring the kids completely. "Mr. Henderson," she said warmly, giving him a respectful handshake. "It's so good to see you again. You look exactly the same as when you were teaching me about perseverance and standing up for what's right." Robert smiled broadly. Jennifer Morrison, the girl who thought she couldn't write, then went on to write the best essay about justice I'd ever read from a sixth grader. The children were now completely silent, watching this interaction with growing confusion and concern. Who was this official-looking woman, and why was she treating the rotten grandpa with such obvious respect? Agent Morrison turned to face the children. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Are you the children who have been harassing Mr. Henderson?" Tommy, who had been so bold just minutes before, now looked like he wanted to disappear. "We were just what?" Agent Morrison interrupted. "Just destroying the property of one of the most respected educators this community has ever had. Just terrorizing a man who spent 45 years of his life making sure children like you had the tools to succeed." Madison started to cry. Jake looked at his feet. Tommy tried one last desperate attempt at defiance. "He's just some old man. Nobody cares about him." Agent Morrison's expression became ice cold. "Nobody cares about him?" She pulled out her FBI credentials and held them where all the children could see. "I'm Special Agent Jennifer Morrison, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Mr. Henderson was my teacher." He's the reason I had the confidence to pursue law enforcement and eventually join the FBI. The children's eyes went wide. Tommy's face had gone completely pale. And he's not just some old man, Agent Morrison continued. He's the teacher who helped police officer Sarah Chen find her calling. He taught Judge Patricia Walsh about fairness and justice. He inspired Detective Mike Rodriguez to serve his community. Half the people who protect and serve this town learned their values sitting in Mr. Henderson's classroom. At that moment, as if on cue, Officer Chen's patrol car pulled up behind the FBI sedan. She got out, nodded respectfully to Agent Morrison, and walked over to join them. "Good morning, Mr. Henderson," Officer Chen said warmly. "I brought some information for these young people about vandalism laws and harassment statutes. I thought they might be interested to learn about the serious legal consequences for damaging someone's property." Now Tommy was openly shaking. We didn't know," he stammered.
Didn't know what?
Robert asked quietly. It was the first time he'd spoken since the children arrived, and his voice carried a teacher's authority that made all 5 kids look directly at him. "Didn't know that I was a human being who deserved basic respect. Didn't know that throwing rocks through an elderly person's window could seriously injure them, or didn't know that actions have consequences." Madison was sobbing now. "We're sorry, Mr. Henderson. We didn't mean to hurt you. We thought you were." "You thought I was what?" Robert asked gently but firmly. "Just some old man nobody cared about," Jake whispered, looking ashamed. Robert nodded slowly. "I see. And that would make it acceptable to torment me." The children shook their heads rapidly. Agent Morrison stepped forward again. "Here's what's going to happen. First, you're all going to apologize properly to Mr. Henderson. Not because you got caught, but because you understand that what you did was wrong. Second, you're going to make restitution for the damaged window and the garden plants you destroyed. Third, you're going to perform community service. And I suggest you start by asking Mr. Henderson if there are ways you can help him maintain his property." Officer Chen added, "And fourth, I'll be having conversations with all of your parents today. They need to understand what their children have been doing and what could have happened if this had escalated further." Tommy was crying now too. "Please don't arrest us. Please. We'll do whatever you want." Robert looked at these 5 children, the same age as thousands of students he'd taught over the years, and felt his teacher's instincts kick in. They had made terrible choices, but they were still children who could learn from this experience. "I don't want you arrested," Robert said calmly. "I want you to understand something. Every person you meet has a story, has people who care about them, has contributed something to the world. When you decided I was just some old man, you stopped seeing me as a human being. That's how bullying starts. That's how people get hurt." He gestured toward Agent Morrison and Officer Chen. "These remarkable women started as children just like you. The difference is they learned to treat others with respect and use their strength to protect people instead of hurting them." Madison wiped her eyes and stepped forward. "Mr. Henderson, I'm really sorry. We were being awful. Can we really help you with your garden?" Over the next hour, something beautiful happened. The children, now genuinely remorseful and eager to make amends, listened as Robert told them about Martha, about the roses she'd planted, about the life they'd built together. Agent Morrison shared stories about how Mr. Henderson had helped her believe in herself when her own father had abandoned the family. Officer Chen talked about how his patience and creative teaching methods had saved her academic career. By the end of the conversation, Tommy was asking if Robert could teach him about growing roses. Jake wanted to know if he could help repair the broken window. Madison asked if Robert had any other students who had become FBI agents. "The thing is," Robert said, sitting on his front steps surrounded by the children who had terrorized him just hours before, "I've taught thousands of students over the years. Some became police officers, some became teachers, some became parents who raised good children. Some struggled with difficulties I never even knew about, but every single one of them taught me something too." He looked at each child individually. "You taught me today that people can change. That underneath hurtful behavior, there are usually children who just need guidance and a chance to do better." Agent Morrison and Officer Chen exchanged glances. They had come prepared to intimidate these kids into leaving Robert alone. Instead, they were witnessing their former teacher do what he'd always done best: turn a teachable moment into an opportunity for growth and understanding. As the children left that day, after promising to return the next afternoon to help with yard work and planning a fundraiser to pay for the broken window, Robert felt something he hadn't experienced in months: purpose. Martha's roses still needed tending. His garden still needed care, but now he wouldn't be doing it alone. And those children would learn that the elderly man they'd dismissed as worthless was actually surrounded by a network of people whose lives he had touched and improved. The story spread quickly through the neighborhood. Within a week, Mrs. Patterson had organized a community appreciation day for Robert. The Brennan family, Tommy's parents, showed up at his door with a formal apology and an offer to help with any home maintenance he needed. Most importantly, Robert rediscovered something he'd lost in his grief. His identity wasn't just Martha's husband or some old man. He was Robert Henderson, educator, mentor, and respected member of a community that truly valued his contributions. The children kept their promise. Every afternoon after school, at least one of them would stop by to help with gardening, to listen to stories about his teaching days, or just to check on him. Tommy became especially interested in the roses and spent hours learning about proper pruning and fertilizing. "Mr. Henderson," Tommy said one afternoon as they worked together in the garden, "I'm really sorry we called you names. You're not rotten at all. You're actually pretty cool." Robert smiled, his hands deep in the soil of Martha's rose bed. "Thank you, Tommy. You know what? You're pretty cool too." 6 months later, Robert received a letter that made him cry tears of joy. It was from Agent Morrison's office, but it wasn't official FBI business. She was writing to invite him to speak at a law enforcement academy about the importance of community mentorship and how teachers shape the character of future public servants. The letter ended with a simple line: "You once taught me that everyone has value and potential. I'd like to help you share that lesson with a new generation of people who will dedicate their lives to protecting others." Robert looked at Martha's photo on his mantle. "See that, sweetheart? 45 years later, and I'm still teaching." As he prepared his speech for the academy, Robert reflected on everything that had happened. He had learned that respect isn't automatically given based on age or past achievement. It has to be earned and sometimes reclaimed. But more importantly, he had rediscovered that his legacy wasn't just in the past. It was alive in every person he had taught, every life he had influenced, and every child who still needed guidance. The children who had once called him Rotten Grandpa now called him Mr. Henderson with genuine affection. They had learned that beneath his quiet exterior was a man who had shaped their community in ways they never could have imagined. And Robert had learned that being alone didn't mean being powerless. Sometimes it just meant you had forgotten to look around and see all the people whose lives you had touched, who were ready to stand up for you when you needed them most. The final lesson, as it turned out, wasn't just for the children. It was for Robert too. Your value doesn't disappear when you get old. It just sometimes needs to be reminded to the world and to yourself.